Yine beraberiz. Birazdan küresel raporlama ekosisteminde büyük dönüşüm, tek rapora doğru isimli panel.
Now we are going to proceed with the panel. And before this panel, we do have a honors speaker, Professor Norman King. I would like to say hi, Mervyn King.
South Africa. He is a professor. He has been a chair, director, and chief executive of several companies listed on the London, Luxembourg, and Johannesburg stock exchanges. He has consulted, advised, and spoken on legal, business, advertising, sustainability, and corporate governance issues in over 60 countries, and has received many awards from international bodies around the world, including the World Federation of Stock Exchanges and the International Federation of Accountants. We are listening to you, sir.
Good day, everybody, and I'm delighted to be at this conference. And may I say that it's very timely because there are huge changes happening in corporate reporting, especially in the ESG space. Sustainability, like a coin, has two sides. The side that we looked at, certainly in the first decade of the 21st century, was what were the impacts of the activities of a company and its outputs, its product and its waste, for example, on the three critical dimensions, the economy, society, and the environment, for sustainable development. But there were some events between the two decades, namely the collapse of Lehman Brothers and the GFC, which had a huge impact on limited liability companies, on its financial condition, its balance sheet, on its operating performance, its income statements, its cash flows, on its risk profile, its cost of capital. And so the other side of sustainability came to the fore. So in the international reporting framework, to which Paul and I were parties, I as chair, he was then chief executive of the International Integrated Reporting Council, we spoke, and still in the framework is value creation. The word enterprise is not mentioned because we were looking at it through the lens of sustainability reporting in the sense of the impacts of the activities of a company and its product on those three dimensions, but being aware that there was the other impact through the three dimensions on the company. So economically, there was the Lehman Brothers GFC. Socially, there is the pandemic, 2020. And environmentally, there's climate change. And you can see those three things, the impact it's having on limited liability companies. And that concept was actually discussed between the then chief executive of GRI, Ernst, and me as chair. And Jean Rogers was there. She left and went to America, and she started Sustainability Accountancy Standards Board and started developing enterprise value creation standards and developing specifically for industries. And today there are for 77 industries. The cry to try and get rid of this clutter and confusion became louder and louder through the pandemic. And eventually, IFRS issued a consultation paper saying, should it increase its mandate from financial reporting to include sustainability reporting? They got an overwhelming affirmative response, and so agreed to increase their powers to include sustainability reporting, and announced that they would establish an international sustainability standards board on a global baseline basis of reports that to test in a country, I'll just choose a country, Belarus. Belarus might well have sustainability standards developed by legislation in that country. But you would test the quality of those standards against the global baseline standards of the proposed ISSB. Well, time moved on. Brexit happened. The European Union has European Union laws, and it is a straitjacket. They've set timelines as to when there'll be no more combustion engine motor cars on the road. Timelines when no more will there be plant machinery driven by fossil fuels. So you have this legal framework in which then the financial reporting directives, which EFRAG, European Financial Reporting Advisory Group, were charged with looking at it and seeing whether it's fitted into these legal constraints and legal timelines. And they came out and issued their corporate sustainability reporting directives, which embodied this double materiality concept of looking at the inputs, the inside the company impacts outside, and the outside impacts into the company. The sustainability, the EVC standards they focused on the impact of these three dimensions on the limited liability company, and those three financial elements I've already mentioned to you. On the 3rd of November, so very timely this conference, the IFRS, true to its word, announced that the VRF, the Value Reporting Foundation, which had been formed to house the merger of Sustainability Accountancy Standards Board in America with the International Integrated Reporting Council, which had developed the Integrated Reporting Framework, where an overarching framework where we as corporate leaders, as directors, could apply those principles of integration of resources used, the capitals as we called it in the framework, and the relationship with stakeholders to show true value and or preservation or erosion of value of the capitals. And we named 6 capitals in the II framework, resources used. So the CSRD are to be mandated in the 27 states of the EU, which now, of course, excludes the UK. In going back some 20-odd years, when there were several standards on financial reporting, and there was a need to converge those standards, regulators and governments did not play a role, were not playing their part in trying to converge them. And so the IFRS came to be born, a private sector initiative. And IFRS was hugely successful in developing financial reporting standards through the IASB, International Accounting Standards Board, over which it had oversight through its board of trustees. And these were adopted by major economies, European economies, France, Germany, Italy, the UK. Others followed the leaders. And today there are 144 countries that adopt the IASB. But please note, as Sir David Tweedy, who was involved in all this at the time, and I discussed in a fireside chat, which is recorded with ICAS, Institute of Chartered Accountants of Scotland, it's on their website, you can listen to it, is different from what is happening now with the ISSB. Because the ISSB has been born, and now the announcement by the IFRS that the CDSB, Carbon Disclosure Standards Board, and the VRF, that's SASB and the IRC, will be, and I use the precise words, consolidated into the ISSB. The intention being that the ISSB will be a Delaware non-commercial company, not for profit, registered in Delaware, the United States, for corporate reasons, and I can understand that. I don't know whether it's yet been formed. So this could be a pre-incorporation contract. I don't know. Also, as a very experienced person in the corporate world, I understand the concepts of acquired by or merged with, but consolidated into is quite novel. And what are they consolidating IFRS into the ISSB? Are they consolidating VRF as a legal entity? Or are they consolidating its assets, the IR framework and the SASB standards? Whatever it is, it seems to me that consolidated into connotes that it's acquired by the ISSB. That means that a standard setter on sustainability standards focused on enterprise value creation now has ownership of the framework which connects the financial and the so-called non-financial and oversight over it. You will see that is, I'm going to call it lopsided. And there's a perceived conflict that the Sustainability Standards Board will have oversight over the IR framework, which, following the principle which the TRWG, the Readiness Working Group of the IFRS, has said they're not going to reinvent the wheel, but will rely on the learnings, their word, not mine, the learnings of the group of five that said they would collaborate in establishing the standards in the ISSB. Well, then the IR has been tested, and as Richard Sexton, last chairman of the IRC, said at the COP meeting in Glasgow, that there's $60 trillion who have followed the EVC standards and have done integrated reports around the world. There are 25 regional bodies, including Integrated Reporting of America. There are countries where awards have been held in these countries for the best integrated report in that country, in the world. The words integrated report have taken on a meaning. There's huge market value in integrated report. So the question arises that are we in a stage where we actually have parallel development of sustainability reporting, the CSRDs and the ISSB? The TRWG and EFRAC have said they're not talking to try and align these standards. Only this morning, I was with a large group which has 30 subsidiaries in different countries, some of those being in the EU. They are mandated to follow the double materiality CSRDs. Others may follow the ISSB. The IFRS cannot and hasn't got the power to mandate the ISSB standards. That will have to be adopted by each jurisdiction. But does it follow that the UK, for example, will follow the ISSB, or will they follow the CSRDs? The answer is I don't know. In South Africa, we have the Financial Reporting Standards Council, which some years ago adopted the IASB Financial Reporting Standards, said the management commentary is completely voluntary. And to quote a senior partner of KPMG, ever since the management commentary has been put into the bottom drawer of preparers, very few people have dealt with management commentary. And the basis for conclusion in the management commentary is vague. Is it actually a management report to the board? Is it approved by the board at all? Are we going to have a system which arises with the board approving the financial statements according to IFRS standards, approving sustainability global baseline standards of EVC, enterprise value creation standards, but a board not approving the connectivity between the financial and the non-financial. Management commenting on it. Well, in 2017, the IASB started developing a management commentary and snatched clauses out of the IR framework into that management commentary. I believe that was, first of all, beyond their conceptual framework and was ultra vires the IASB's powers, beyond their powers. But nevertheless, 1 month after the IFRS, their oversight body, the owner in colloquial language of the IASB, announced an exposure draft on their management commentary, which included these integrated framework provisions. The timing was clearly wrong. At 2017, when they started working on this, there was an atmosphere of competitiveness amongst these framework providers and standard setters. Now there's a statement of intent and there is collaboration between them. So it's a completely different context in which this management commentary exposure draft has been issued. And so my comments, and you can see it on the IFRS website, is that it was, from a timing point of view, misconceived, and from a content point of view, misconceived. Because it's not, in my judgment, a manner for management to comment. It's a matter for the most important body of persons in the corporate architecture of the limited liability company, and that's the board. The most informed body of persons to apply its minds to what is in the sustainability report and the financial report of significant importance, significant impact on value, and put it not in IFRS speak or ISSB speak, but as we say in the IR framework, in clear, concise, and understandable language, so that the user can be more informed about the true value of the company and its longevity, as this board actually applied its mind to the long-term health of the company. So let me conclude by saying this, that I hope that we don't have this parallel development. We also have the SEC in the United States been collecting information on sustainability reporting, and hopefully by year end, they will make some announcements on what they believe should be incorporated into sustainability reporting. And hopefully they will try and follow what's happening with the ISSB. I don't know, nor does anybody sitting here and being online in this webinar. But one thing I do know, and it's common cause, everyone agrees, including IFRS, including the EU, including the SEC, that the financial and the so-called non-financial need to be connected, integrated, so that one can see the true value, the impact, and not just look at balance sheets and not just look at sustainability issues without knowing the numbers. These two are inextricably intertwined, they're integrated. And so there's one commonality in the ISSB, in the CSRDs, they believe they should be integrated with their financial reporting, which is IASB, with the SEC, with the FASB, that there needs to be connection. So the one common factor is in fact the IR framework, tried and tested over the last 10 years. And you would be a huge stepping stone towards what I believe is the end game, a comprehensive corporate reporting system. So I leave you, unfortunately, with a picture of opacity, because I can't see where this is all going to end up. But I suggest the following. I believe IFRS is the correct body to have taken this course. I believe it's correct in establishing a Sustainability Standards Board. But a clean architecture, governance architecture, will be IFRS owning the IR framework and the board, and having an independent board for the IR framework, an independent board which exists for the IASB, an independent board which is about to be appointed for the ISSB, but not the board of the ISSB to oversee integrated reporting, to oversee any revision that might become necessary in the time ahead, and to have oversight over that. It's a perceived conflict, and it causes, I think, opacity when we try to get transparency. Thank you very much, and hope you enjoy your webinar.
Do we go on? Or is there some introduction? Gula? Need to unmute. That's it.
Yes, I think that now is okay.
Okay, great.
Okay. Thank you. First of all, I would like to welcome all of you on behalf of the Turkish Capital Market Association, which is, this one is one of the biggest events organized by Turkish Capital Market Association. So, and also I would like to welcome on behalf of Integrated Reporting Association Turkey, which we are organizing, you know very well. You know, Helen, Jonathan, Paul, already part of this association. You are supporting, you are a great supporter for us. So I think in reporting world, there are a lot of things going on. I'm happy to share these development with the key and main expert of the world like you. So Paul, floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. And it's delightful to be sharing this panel with three people that I feel I know so well and also have the ultimate respect for. We've all worked together on integrated reporting and before in many cases. And it should be fascinating because I know that everyone has their own views and will join in the conversation. So thank you to Helen and Jonathan. And of course, an amazing thank you to you, Gula, for being the inspiration behind everything that happens for integrated reporting and other things in Turkey, and such a great global ambassador for all that work that goes on. Right, so let's get started. We are a little late, so we'll try and speak as the framework says, with conciseness, and move ourselves forward. So also, of course, a great thank you to Mervyn for his insights, and we will certainly pick up on that, but from our own perspectives. So Helen, if I could kindly start with you. I mean, you're an insider in all of this, not in the detail, but certainly in the oversight, having been there for some time and being one of the founding figures of integrated reporting back before it was even known about. And I just wonder, from the perspective of corporate reporting as a whole, what you think about the global direction of the sort of ecosystem is. And I'm not talking specifically about one element, just in the big picture.
Sure, thank you. And I do wish people would remember that conciseness point, Paul. I think that sometimes gets lost in the way that things have moved on, but it's so important if we're going to have impact. Anyway, I shall try to be concise now. Just to go back a little before we get to the current days, I do think we've seen a big focus in new ways of reporting globally over the past few years, and many organisations, including ACCA, itself. We've made the move to integrated reporting or explored other ways of increasing the relevance of reporting. And I think the strategic context for this is really that hugely increased public demand for government and business accountability. Certainly that's a huge strategic driver that I'm always thinking about within my own organisation. So for business, one driver is taking into account wider measures than profit and loss, and focusing on how business should report more broadly, more precisely about their impact on the planet, the community and on society, and really responding to that stakeholder and consumer focus in the area. I mean, another driver that we can all see is that modern business, modern finance, the explosion of digital technology, super fast communications, they've all made national borders largely meaningless in a business sense. Unfortunately, we can talk about other kinds of borders and the way that's been working the past few years, but in a business sense, it means global reporting frameworks are the only ones that make sense for businesses. And I think that's been huge. And specifically on integrated reporting, where I've had close involvement, it's the approach it takes along with integrated thinking that's absolutely crucial if we do want to drive changes that we're all talking about, that we all see as so urgent to address today's challenge. And the approach of integrated reporting with the focus on those capitals that Mervyn talked about really helps to drive that. It helps to understand the interdependencies, drive good decision making, and focus on value over the short, medium and long term. So that's really positive, really encouraging, especially given the impacts and seriousnesses of both the COVID crisis and the climate crisis, and I believe other challenges around social inclusion. But I think, as Mervyn touched on, as this type of thinking has developed through integrated reporting and other work, we have seen that proliferation of standards and guidance and bodies, particularly in the sustainability area, and that there has been some concern and confusion about that. So that's why, you know, coming to the here and now and talk about developments in global reporting, that's one of the drivers for that ISSB announcement, which aims to pull it all together. There's real impetus behind that leading up to COP26 in Glasgow. I'm really excited about that. I think it's a great step forward, and it's a landmark in corporate reporting. And who knew that I would be so excited about sustainability standards? But I really, really am. And I think it's one of those landmark moments that we're all proud to be even a tiny part of.
Thank you, Helen. And for those of you who were listening to my keynote yesterday, I actually had a slide up of a little dog bouncing up and down with excitement at the announcements in Glasgow. So we haven't got the GIF here, but nonetheless, I'm sure that I share that. And I'm sure, Jonathan, you come from rather inside, as an insider to what's been going on. But again, initially just lifting out of the specifics, what is your view generally about where the system is heading towards?
Thanks, Paul. And I also really share the excitement that Helen's expressed and you as well. I think probably one of the missing pieces in the jigsaw that I think the announcements recently will help to address are kind of twofold. One, I think aligning societal needs, and Helen spoke about the public demand now for information, and I think that's the reflection of societal needs with the interests of capital markets. And I think in particular, we saw this at Glasgow, mobilising capital towards achieving net zero climate change targets, but also meeting other sustainable development challenges. So I think when we think about the end game, obviously we're talking very, very in the short term about creating the architecture for standards and how the resources, if you like, are going to be used to develop that architecture. But I think the end game, particularly from a capital markets perspective, is mobilizing capital towards those sustainable development ends. And I think there are really three things that I hope the announcements recently will help to address three of the trends that we're seeing. One is, I think, the absolute acceptance now that we need well-governed companies, and that boards of companies and the leadership of companies should be accountable for a greater range of factors than the financial stewardship of the organization. And I think what is potentially game-changing about the ISSB is not only its establishment under the IFRS Foundation's auspices, but the use of existing standards and frameworks. So this is not about reinventing the wheel and creating complexity, but it really is about mainstreaming existing resources. So if we pick on the IR framework for a second, one of the content elements in the framework is around governance and board governance. And so I think if we want well-governed companies, that's one aspect that we might see coming through. I think the second piece is around the role of finance. Again, Glasgow highlighted this brilliantly in terms of the role finance must play in addressing climate, but also broader sustainable development challenges. And I think the announcement helps to address that issue. And then finally, an issue that's been close to our heart in the integrated thinking and reporting movement is around the connectivity of information. And I think there's a huge opportunity now to connect the different buckets of information that companies produce and that standard setters are asking companies to produce: financial information, ESG information, and increasingly information on intangibles. We do need a framework to be accepted globally that connects these buckets of information so that we don't end up with siloed information. And again, I think the announcements pave the way for enabling that connectivity of information that we all want to see.
That's great. Thank you, Jonathan. And Gula, just coming to you more specifically about sort of emerging markets and in Turkey, this is probably all hasn't really hit home yet in those countries. I just wonder, from your perspective, as somebody who is so much of a leader in the emerging markets, well, what's your view?
Paul, first of all, I'm happy to hear positive view after COP26, after all exciting and surprising announcement, which we are very excited to understand the detail. We are still waiting to understand more, actually. But as an emerging country, actually, we have quite similar situation with all others. So because we are under the global risk and global risk environment, which is the main one is the climate crisis. So recently we approved a Paris Agreement in Turkey. So we are the part of the European Union. We are very close market for European Union. So we are very much interested in the result of European Green Deal. So we have to adapt our listed and SME companies to align with the European Green Deal regulation. And also we are aiming to reach sustainable development goals until, we have just 9 years left to reach sustainable development goals. So we are at the same situation to care about the whole global risk and global situation. But of course, we have to be realistic to complete all our homework on time as an emerging country because of scale resources, because of we just started a little bit late to adapt the new challenge. And so we have kind of difficulties, but the good news is that especially I can talk about Little Integrated Reporting Association in Turkey. Our main aim is that trying to increase awareness of all kind of companies, not only listed company, but also small and medium-sized companies, to prepare for future reporting requirement. Because reporting is the just result, we know all. So before that, we have to prepare other companies to provide reliable and necessary information to disclose. So which is our biggest challenge at the moment, because we need infrastructure, we need a training, we need to increase awareness of the companies. And we are actually quite good program that comes from also government and NGOs and business side. For example, after Green Deal announcement, our government prepared Green Deal action plan which is great to see. It is actually including also reporting and disclosing standards, and financial sustainable finance standards include this action plan. So in Turkey also, as an integrated reporting association, we just started this initiative with a motivation to change our investment environment, how to make it better to compete with developed countries and developed countries companies. Paul, you remember very well how did we start integrated reporting Turkey. Actually, I proposed the project for Investment Environment Development Coordination Council, which is a presidential body. I proposed the project through the Turkish Businessmen Association. They approved this project. And then after that, you came to Turkey and we were all together to launch the guidebook actually created by this project. So at that moment, we have decided to start integrated reporting network. We were very lucky because we had very, very important supporters such as Borsa Istanbul, Turkish Businessmen Association, other founders, very, very strong founders, and they took this action to go forward. And 2020, Investment Environment Development Coordination Council announced another action plan, included integrated reporting and sustainable reporting for 2020 action plan. So Borsa Istanbul lead this project, this action plan, and Integrated Reporting Association, myself, and all other stakeholders provided very good insight. And after the work with Borsa Istanbul and this coordination council members and all stakeholders, Capital Market Board regulated non-financial information standards. They announced sustainable principles framework for the listed companies. So they are now actually disclosing, but only compliant or disclosed standard. However, most of the listed companies already disclose this information, which is the biggest, how do you say, achievement in Turkey and a big achievement of Integrated Reporting Association as well. So, Paul, regulation and motivation is very important for emerging countries. So,
thank you, Gula. That's brilliant, and it really sets the scene of what's happening in Turkey. I just wonder as an offshoot of something that Gula mentioned at the beginning, Helen. I have the privilege of being an honorary member of ACCA. Which I'm truly grateful. But ACCA has an awful lot of finance people who are in SMEs. And I just wonder what your thoughts are around SMEs and what their role will play in the future in the sort of transparency and reporting. You're on mute, Helen.
Apologies for that very basic error. Fantastic that you asked that question, Paul, because there is a real danger that SMBs, as we've started calling it, small and medium-sized businesses, get forgotten in this very important work. And of course, we know that it's the vast majority of businesses are SMBs. 50% of the world's employment is in SMBs, and it's very important that they're fully engaged in the corporate reporting movement, but more importantly, what that can mean for the sustainability of business and our planet. So we were very pleased at COP26 actually to do a piece of work with the ICC, the International Chambers of Commerce, and SAGE, where we were very specifically looking at recommendations that we could make around SMBs. One area, the report was actually titled, and I don't think you'd be surprised about this, Think Small First, and trying to get that ethos into the thinking that It's not an afterthought of having dealt with all the investors and capital markets, then we then move to SMBs. They quite often are left with something very complex and unwieldy. One story that really hit home with me there, of course, supply chain is so critical in all of this. And we heard from WWF where many of the SMBs in their network were being asked to produce different 60-page ESG compliance documents in order to be part of the supply chain of the large businesses, so that they could then report that they'd gone through an exercise to ensure that supply chain. And it's just not sustainable for a small business to be having to go through that. Was very much tick box exercise just to satisfy a large business. So large business and standard setters and regulators all have to take into account how they're going to engage with the SMB sector. We need global standardized SMB-friendly reporting frameworks, and that could speed progress to net zero, because it really then it unleashes the potential of SMBs and allows them to take that positive action rather than being part of an impenetrable compliance exercise.
Yeah, absolutely. And that supply chain point as well, even for the large listed companies, is still going to affect the SMBs, new term for me, far more than, frankly, the larger companies themselves.
Exactly.
As they have to report up. Jonathan, I don't know, again, we're going well off script here, but I don't know if you can just, the other thing that Gula talked about was the SDGs and how the emerging countries are trying to see their role there. And it really ties up a little bit with Mervyn's comments about double materiality and other things, which I don't think we're necessarily going to dive into. But how do you see the play out of the sort of the value side in the capital markets tied together with the mechanisms and things that we need to achieve the SDGs?
Well, I think it's absolutely critical, Paul, and I think the SDGs conversation is developing rapidly and alongside the conversation that's happening more specifically about climate change and climate risk, which is obviously part of the whole sustainable development conversation. The way that we see it playing out from a company perspective and the way things are now developing in terms of how companies are addressing the SDGs is that the first stage seemed to be very much around mapping to the SDGs. So they were thinking about their sustainability strategies and how that mapped to the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And I think we're now on a bit of a transition to really trying to embed the sustainability goals, Sustainable Development Goals, with many companies now, aligning that to the strategy, the strategic development and the business model of the organization. And I think this is where a lot of the developments that are beginning to come to fruition, particularly around the recognition that we're seeing in the EU, and I think more broadly around the role that intangibles are going to play in transforming business models and making the connection between innovation, in the integrated reporting framework, the intellectual capital, and changing products and services so that you power the strategy and the business model of the organization. And that being seen very much as the contribution or a major contribution to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals from a business perspective. And I think many businesses entered the door of the SDGs from the perspective of transparency and mapping, but now they're beginning to see the value, particularly when they engage ESG plus intangibles. They're able to see the value of the innovation in changing the business model and the strategy, and that unlocks a huge amount of value creation potential and a huge number of stakeholders who will be very interested in that conversation. So I think it's a transition, the conversation, but I think once you inject the intangibles into it, I think you then unlock a lot of value. Okay,
that's interesting.
Can I just interject, Paul? Because I agree. At ACCA, we've actually honed in on 9 of the 17 SDGs and made specific strategic commitments, as Jonathan was saying, to contributing to the achievement of those, and we are measuring and targeting and reporting on those, importantly within the integrated reporting framework. So I think that the integrated reporting framework is really, and I think Mervyn said this a very long time ago, but that there is your mechanism for integrating the SDGs into your strategy, into the way you run the business, which is what Jonathan described, and then how you're transparent and report on that. So I think, there is a great coming together. And as businesses and organisations look to motivate their own people, reassure their stakeholders, attract people into their organizations, talent acquisition, the whole piece, being able to tell that story is becoming more and more important. And I truly believe the integrated reporting framework gives us a real opportunity to do that.
I mean, one of the things coming out of Mervyn's talk was the concern that integrated reporting wouldn't play a role going forward. I'm not sure why he thinks that, but that's, who am I to challenge Mervyn King? I'm not going to.
No, I'm not going to either, but I'm very happy about the IFRS Foundation commitment to use the integrated reporting framework to create that connectivity between the financial reporting standards and the sustainability standards. And that's not something we've had before. So I see the framework and the philosophy being much more used as an overarching tool to achieve that genuine integration. And that's what's being committed to. So I'm quite heartened by that.
And I don't, my own piece from that, from being part of integrated reporting in the past, and I know we're all passionate about it, is that I believe that integrated reporting will come out stronger. If you believe in integrated reporting and integrated thinking, is the essence of it, is how I see it.
Well, how else are you going to do it?
Yeah.
No. So that's where I'd leave that point. Yeah.
Gula, your turn to come in on this debate around this. I wonder what your thoughts are.
When I'm listening, I just would like to say integrated reporting, not only name of the report. So meaning of report is integrated information between
Absolutely.
Financial and non-financial. People really don't understand what is really meaning of integrated reporting. So that's why our homework, actually, our duties have to, explain what is really integrated meaning for them. So they always find the report, financial and non-financial information together and try to find the better way to disclose all information regarding integrated reporting, but without understanding maybe meaning of integration. So I think our next step, we have to maybe more focus on this issue, and also not only us, but also new era of reporting, new reporting organizations. They have to compromise, Paul. So we don't make us too tired to understand what they want to do.
Absolutely.
What will be next?
Yeah.
Do you know what I am saying?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Because I think why the three of us are excited by, from being people involved inside the IRC, as you are, Gula, so and your network. I'm not trying to separate, but I think my perception of both what people have said and my own feeling is that we finally are going to get global mandatory sustainability reporting, global mandatory sustainability reporting. It's something that I and the rest of us have dreamed about for 20 years. And I think whilst I totally accept that some of where the rhetoric that's been used to set up the new International Sustainability Standards Board may not be exactly how I would have written it, but that doesn't matter. We have to move on with what we've got and make sure that it is right, fit for purpose as it goes through. Jonathan, from your point of view, you know, we talked a little bit about the Sustainable Development Goals and which sort of links to what's happening in the European Union. The latest statements from the European Commission are talking about the work of the European Commission aligning with that of the ISSB, very much as you know, using the ISSB standards as a baseline and then moving forward with double materiality. Can you see that as a viable way forward? And is that something from the VRF going into this new Sustainability Standards Board you see as a real advantage?
Well, absolutely. And I think the comments from Mairead McGuinness, the Commissioner, last week were really encouraging, because the risk, and I agree actually very much with Mervyn, that the risk from a perception perspective is that you have these two standards systems developing almost, well, at the same time. And how do you make sense of that? And we've always said that we believe that the ISSB should develop that global baseline, a high baseline, but a global baseline of sustainability standards for capital markets, but that should be compatible with jurisdiction level requirements that may be additional to that. So what the European Union has said since the announcement on the 3rd of November has been really consistent with that vision. I think what everyone now accepts, and we've, as you would accept, the Value Reporting Foundation, we've had a lot of conversations with the European Commission and with the organisation EFRAG that is developing the standards, and there is a common commitment across the board to developing something that is compatible going forward, and that has to be more than dialogue. It has to be, you know, really making sure that the language and the terminology is consistent, and that we know where one set of standards ends and another one begins. So I think there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes that maybe people are not necessarily aware of, to drive that compatibility and that connectivity between the different systems that are emerging. So I'm hopeful that that will be the end point.
Great. And I think the thing to remember is that this ISSB, through the oversight of the IFRS Foundation, has the full backing of the capital market regulators, IOSCO and others. And that to me is that's why I talk about global mandatory sustainability reporting, and why, frankly, I get so excited. Yeah. Helen, I don't know if you wanted to add.
Well, yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And what you've both been discussing is hugely important. But I don't think we should forget either that the very strong link now with the USA is so important in what's come through. So SASB's involvement and the support from corporate USA, I think, is really, really critical here, aligned with very vocal and visible support from markets such as China and India. You know, so the opportunity, the exciting opportunity, is to go truly global, and you know, in the area of sustainability in particular, we can't afford to be anything else. So, as you said, there are languages and nuances that we can all quibble about. And in fact, people love quibbling about for a long time. However, you know, the urgency is such that we must move on and take this tremendous opportunity to have a uniquely really global output that can be used to help business to make that contribution in climate change. So I think it's I will never, please don't forget all the regions of the world that are showing support and getting involved, would be my plea. Yeah. Okay.
Gula, any comments from you? You started this last bit, so.
Yes, actually, I think we have two prerequisites. Two things have to must. First, we want single global reporting framework, and this report has to include financial and non-financial information, connected information, not like separate sustainability report or separate annual report. This is the must. This is I believe more than 20 years has to be integrated information. And when I turn out an integrated reporting association, people ask us, it will be the name of the integrated report or not. I said, it will be integrated report because at the end of the day, has to be integrated info, integrated sustainability report, integrated annual report, integrated blah, blah, blah. Have to be integrated, financial and non-financial. We have to see, stakeholder would like to see a connection between financial and non-financial information. Without this one, you are making our life as a stakeholder more difficult to find connection between financial and non-financial, and difficult to understand how the company create value without this connection. So
Great.
That's my...
That's terrific, and I think that's great. That's your plea, if you like, for what we need. Now, I'm conscious of time, and I know Helen and Jonathan have to leave us in a few minutes, and we'll leave Gula and I for a couple of minutes to make closing remarks. So, Jonathan, I don't know if you've got anything outstanding that you'd like to say as any closing comments.
Well, only to say...
Not outstanding in contribution. I'm always assuming that, John. Outstanding in that we haven't mentioned.
Only to say that I was very taken, in 2015, Mark Carney, when he was Governor of the Bank of England and also Chair of the Financial Stability Board, made that speech about the tragedy of the horizon, and that was the precursor to the setting up of the TCFD, the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, and that tragedy of the horizon being the market failure that arises from not taking into consideration today known future risks. And I was very taken on Finance Day at COP26 when he concluded the session there that included the announcement about the ISSB being established and the involvement of the Value Reporting Foundation in all of that. He said the real end game, the prize here, is that we can now resolve that tragedy of the horizon, that we can actually begin that process that enables us to factor into today's decision-making all of those known future risks and opportunities, and to close that tragedy of the horizon. And so for me, I think that to be part of that journey and to be part of the opportunity of helping to resolve one of the really big challenges that we've faced in capital markets and in sustainable development over recent years, is a really great opportunity. And it comes back to the point in the beginning about just the excitement that I think we all feel about being on this journey.
That's great, Jonathan. And I think just to be clear, I think when you say risks, it's also about impacts. It's risks to the business and impacts on society, on our planet. And I know we're in vehement agreement there. Just as an anecdote, the first time Mark Carney talked about the tragedy of the horizons was actually at the World Bank AGM in an IRC integrated reporting session.
Wow.
And so at least we can claim some credit, although I'm sure he would have said it somewhere else. But nonetheless, the first was with us in Washington, D.C. Helen, I don't know if you have any closing comments you'd like to add.
I know we're short of time, Paul. What I would just like to emphasise that there's a huge amount of work to do, and all of this excitement is going to come to nothing unless we manage to translate it into action. And I see it as my responsibility of a leader of a professional body, and those of us who all lead organisations with the capacity to drive action to do that. So I think we can take all the learning that we're having today, but there's so much more to do. And I'm really looking forward to being part of that as well.
Great. And I do believe that for both of you, leading on from the comments from Mervyn, that you, as well as others in your position, have such a great opportunity to influence what happens in the new ISSB. And just as another closing comment is that the conversations that I've had and others have had with those in the International Accounting Standards Board around the creation of the new Sustainability Board is that they are really keen to be part of and work with the new Sustainability Board, not to be seen as too siloed. And I take that as really encouraging. And so please, Helen and Jonathan, please take the leadership in this and make it come out to the right answer. So I'll say goodbye to you two, and thank you very much indeed for joining and for carrying on. And I wish you well.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Gula.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you. Pause.
That leaves us, Gula.
Just we will complete the session. It's actually, it was great discussion. So
it was terrific.
We understood that there's no doubt we need realistic and how do you say, transparent and reliable reporting design. This is our, I think, this responsibility as a leader of reporting world. So I'm sure that this is the message for all reporting or framework provider or regulators, reporting regulators, should be the message to clear up reporting world, to understand and provide understandable and transparent reporting design. So, which is really, I think it's really important, but I think the main issue behind of this, we need a sincere collaboration between all related partners and related organizations to make a meaningful, measurable, comparable, transparent, and realistic reporting design. Without, they have to leave their hat somewhere and then think about for future. Not only care about the organizational benefit, but also have to think about the really global reporting design, what should be for all stakeholders, what will be more useful and necessary reporting design for future generation, as you mentioned yesterday. So yeah, we should leave our hat or our selfish part, and then we have to be a little bit honest ourselves.
I cannot agree with you more fully. I talk about the fact that if you take integrated reporting, you and I know we totally believe in everything that it stands for. It might be that in the short term, we have to compromise to get to the end game where we have what you call the single global integrated reporting regime. But I think if we stick our, it's like if you stick your poles in the ground too hard, it may mean that we don't move as fast as we should towards something that is suitable for everybody. Yeah. So I think about collaboration rather than compromise. And actually, when in my talk yesterday, I used the book, the Sapiens book by Professor Harari. And the other element, I talked there about storytelling, but one of the other key components of why the human race has dominated our planet is collaboration. So we had the ability to storytell and execute into the future, but only by working together were we able to do that. And I think that's the other side of, in a smaller way, what we're leading to here. Do you have any other final comments, or shall I close off?
I think I have to invite all leaders to be responsible and to be honest. And I hope they will make our life a little bit easier. That's my final remark, actually.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Just to close off, I made a few notes just to pick up on a few points that were made during the session. So I thought I'd share those with you, not necessarily in the right order, so I haven't had time, but just some snippets of what was said. And I think one of the things, I think it was you, Gula, talked about proliferation in sustainability reporting and standards. And I think we are now, the excitement I think that many of us feel is that within the next 12 to 24 months, we should see that proliferation dramatically be reduced. It may not be all one to start with, but at least we will have a series of dominant standards that are government and regulatory led rather than NGO, non-governmental organizations led. There was a great comment about from Helen about the public demand for government and society towards the capital markets. You know, society needs an alignment with capital markets, was a quote from Jonathan. And I think that also leads on to that society doesn't need it only from capital markets, but that'll drive down to small and medium-sized enterprises, medium-sized businesses, as Helen would say, through the supply chain. If we don't have a single integrated transparency methodology, that'll be impossible for the small and medium-sized businesses to follow. And I truly believe that as well. I think the other, just a few more. Jonathan talked about integrated reporting being intertwined with integrated thinking. And I think that's what we all believe. And it comes to your last plea and the statement from Paul Polman that, you know, is the world a better place because your business is in it? What a thought for a board to consider. The excitement was the other thing, and that didn't come from me, it came from Helen originally. And I think those of us who've been in this a long time are truly excited. The other key word that kept being used by all three of our panelists was the term integrated. And it isn't from the IRC, it's that connectivity and integration that has to be there. And I do believe that if we line up the word integrated with what you called, Gula, a single global reporting mechanism together to create global mandatory sustainability reporting, we are really at the stage where we can really bring this home now. And then we can start making sure that business and all of us can contribute to saving our planet and making it a place that our children and grandchildren and others can exist in the same way that we have. And I'd like to thank the panel, thank the audience, and thank you, Gula, because it is you that is all our inspiration for letting us have this session today. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. It was a great session. Thank you for all participants, Helen, Jonathan, and especially you, and also Mervyn. I hope we will have a chance to discuss for next year or other conference together. Thank you very much.
Great pleasure. Thank you.